Good afternoon. Welcome. You can continue eating as though you need permission, or as though that I could stop you. We welcome you to another leadership luncheon. Appreciate your being here. At your tables, if you don't have a business card, we prefer you can just drop a business card in the basket when it comes around. But if you don't, for the door prize, you could just fill this little card at your table out. And Ginger and Lisa are going to be coming around and pick them up. Raise your hands, Ginger, Lisa. Also, let's give them a hand. They're the ones that put this together and help with all the work. We appreciate it. Also, in the center of the table is a little box. If you'd like to make a donation for the next leadership luncheon, that's what that's there for. If you're making out a check, just make it out to Weinbrenner. Weinbrenner's fine. Or the James Allen Hawaii trip, either one. I'm Jim Allen. I'm the Vice President of Institutional Advancement here. And we're here to learn, right? Leadership skills. And how many of you have real smart kids? How many have even smarter grandkids? Exceptional grandkids. Well, it's like the joke, little Johnny comes home and tells Dad, shows him the report card, and the dad says, well, Johnny, you could bring these grades up. Jimmy always is at the top of the class. And little Johnny looks at Dad and says, yeah, but his parents are really smart. So we want to have prayer, and then we're going to get started this afternoon. We appreciate our panelists being here, and we're going to introduce them after this video. But first, let's have prayer. Father, we thank you for this privilege of coming together. We ask that you would guide and direct us, open our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, this video that you're going to see is Jeffrey Immelt. He's the CEO of General Electric, and this was from the Global Leadership Summit last year. Immediately following the video, what we're going to ask you to do is introduce yourselves around the table, and you've got a sheet at the table. You're going to begin to discuss the video clip, and I'll give you a little more information after that. But right now, we'll watch this clip from the Global Leadership Summit.
You talk a lot about the concept of simplification. So can you explain that?
So I got to my room last night, and there was a book on my desk that you'd written called Simplification. So put her there, brother. No, I think institutions in your own life, I'd say we're all searching in this global, really complicated world new ways to run institutions. So we're 140 years old, big, complicated, and we live in a complicated world, highly regulated. And I felt probably 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, again, having been in Crotonville and places like that, I wasn't sensing the joy in work, and look, in the end, I've done this long enough, it's all my fault. So when I'm critical, it's not like I'm blaming anybody other than myself. But I just felt like, one more rule, one more meeting, we were just losing sight of our purpose as a company. And I spent a fair amount of time, I still do, but I was spending a fair amount of time in Silicon Valley with entrepreneurs and startup companies to really try to figure out how they saw their world and what they were doing. And we started about 18 months ago on what we call the culture of simplification. And I would describe it, Bill, as kind of the interwoven concept of kind of 4 ideas. One is less management, right? We just empower people, get decisions closer to the market, put the decision makers in the field where they belong. Smaller headquarters, bigger in operations, fewer meetings, fewer processes, less of everything. Yep. Lean management. The market rules. Why do I come to work in the morning It's not to go to a meeting in the conference room, it's to satisfy customers. Our future, job security, whatever future you have, gets created in the marketplace. Become hyper-competitive. 3, put things on the clock. Start small, but start today. Start today, what we call fast. Test and learn. Don't feel like you have to be perfect, but test and learn. And the 4th aspect is, we just live in a world with it's networked and transparent. So use information technology to network the company better, make it more transparent. So think about simpler structure, focused externally, a real focus on speed, and a sense that you can, with information, you can empower people with information in ways you couldn't do it before. And old big companies like GE have to constantly be paranoid about just getting too trapped in our history. And so about every 5 or 10 or 15 years, you got to be willing to blow it up and start all over. And that's what we talked about. It's what you have 10 rules of simplification. I can plug each thought I have into one of your 10 rules in there. And I think people are thirsting for that.
Well,
Carly talked about it. It's just, look, I respect everybody who's willing to be a public servant in our country. These are really thankless jobs, but the system of governance is just antiquated. They were trying to get things done by and things like that, and the world is, at the same time, moving so quickly. You've got to be willing to throw out the old, and I think every good institution today is trying to find a way to govern itself in an effective way in a broadly different time.
Hey, so
simplify. Around your table, you have the sheet positioning your organization for the future, and 4 ideas of simplification that Jeffrey just mentioned. Perhaps one of those hit you. Introduce yourself around the table and begin the discussion. And you've got about, how much time do they have to discuss? Till about 12:30, and then we're going to introduce the panel. So introduce yourself to one another. Sounds like you've had some good discussions. How many of you have solved the problems of your institution now? Got them all solved? It's all done? You guys took care of it here?
Yeah.
That's good. Well, first we want to introduce our panel today as we begin the questions, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves and just tell us what they do, a little bit about themselves. Mike.
I'm Father Mike Hohenbrink. I'm the pastor at St. Michael's here in town. And in case you're coming to an event, you need to distinguish whether you're coming to the downtown or the east, because we're all one parish, but we have 2 locations. I can't tell you how many times people come to a wedding at the wrong place. We're all one parish, and so we're all involved in pastor in the sense of St. Michael's. And it happens to be one of our larger parishes because it's the only Catholic parish in Hancock County. And we probably have 3,200 families, 10,000 people or something like that.
Josh Anderson. I'm Executive Director at Hancock, Hardin, Wyandotte, Putnam Community Action Commission, HHWP Community Action Commission for short. I'm very relatively new in my leadership journey, so I'm actually looking very much forward to hearing from Pastor Bill and Jim and Father Mike here. And I've been in my position since about November 1st, and many of the things that we're discussing today are things that I'm actively involved with my organization. So I appreciate the invitation, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, Josh.
John Bookmyer, and I run a small company that works with healthcare organizations, mainly hospitals, to help folks with chronic and acute pain. I've done that. This is my 6th year. Before that, I was involved with the Blanchard Valley health system here in town as the COO of the health system and president of the hospital for about 12 years. And then spent 12 years before that in public accounting. So I guess I have 6 more years for the pain management group folks sitting in the back there that I have to go, and then they'll have had enough of me, I guess, and I'll be looking for something else to do. So.
I'm Bill Shoemaker, the director of New Churches for Churches of God General Conference. It has 2 focuses. Just like in a family, you can grow it by having children through the new birth experience, or by adoption, and so that's the area that I work in.
Okay, and welcome. We're grateful that you gave up your time to be here with us. We look forward to your astute answers to these questions.
No pressure there.
The first question, of course, is about assessment. In the academic world, we don't know much about assessment. We over-assess and then assess. What are some beneficial self-assessment exercises to improve the health of an organization moving forward?
I see my name. Does that mean I'm supposed to?
That's what it means. You're not supposed to let them know that that one's for you.
Oh, I see. That's good.
That's,
Thank you.
ignore the person behind the curtain. Ignore the person behind the curtain. Please.
I won't reveal that information the next time.
Yeah, please don't reveal
That was
that.
the only one on the list.
That reminds me of a short story that, we have the 2nd grade reconciliation in the church, and I was asking the young man, 2nd grade, after he mentioned his sin, wanted forgiven, I said, is there anything else that you would like to ask forgiveness for? Father Mike, I'm saving that for my next reconciliation. So we're saving a little of this information as we go through. For example, I came 15 years ago to St. Michael's, and when I came, people like Scott and Dave and Bob and a few more people over there know that we were in the process, in the throes of looking at what we were going to do with a building program. I had no idea what I was going to do. They thought that I had some answers to that, but I came, and gradually we put together a whole series of neighborhood meetings. Now, it seems like it's simple enough, but, to announce it and to make it happen, and I even saw you shaking your head, Scott, we still remember the neighborhood meetings where we were trying to figure out what to do. And so I guess something as simple as that is a tremendous assessment tool, a way to get the opinions of people. We did have a couple of interesting things that we were doing at the neighborhood meeting. Somebody taking notes. We had people introduce themselves. And as a new person, I found it really helpful that they did a name plan as they went around the table. They made a chart. So when I went home, I could say, now what was it, that guy Joe? He's the one that said this. And over across from him was Mary, and she said this. So that was a very helpful piece. But this neighborhood structure for us as a church and as a new person coming with a major decision on what to do was very helpful. Matter of fact, we have used that format a couple of other times since, and even more recently with a faith campaign. I'm going to wait and tell you that later. I can't do that now.
That's the tease for the next segment.
That actually was, I would throw that out as one of the things, not something that's totally new, but something that was very effective for us.
And I think that goes along with getting closer to the marketplace by creating buy-in within the congregation, within the organization, and not simply the top layer of leadership.
You know, Jim, if I could add something here. One of the things you hear a lot of times is people saying, well, I'm not in a leadership position, or I don't have the ability to change my organization because of my position. So how do I do assessment? How do I gain influence? And what I would encourage folks is there's multiple places to go to learn these things about getting feedback. You can get feedback from a small group in a church. You can get it from Sunday school. You can get it from your spouse. There's all kinds of avenues, but I don't think we look at it as all one, if you will, one life, that we have this opportunity to get self-assessment. I think for me, what happens a lot of times, I get a lot of that assessment and I don't like it. So I try to ignore it instead of saying what my wife at home is saying, the same thing to me that my folks at work are saying, that a small group that I lead on Sunday night. And it's interesting, if in my better moments, when I take all that together, it really comes back to pointing a lot of to the same things, and a lot of movement that we either need to do organizationally or I need to do personally. So to me, it's about working in groups and then being willing to take what that group's telling you.
Change is hard on leaders, but not as hard as it is on those being led. The more control you have psychologically, the more control you have over change, the less stress. The less control you have over change, the more stress. Okay, here's another question. What are the top three trends that we all need to position ourselves for now to be prepared for in the future? What are the top three trends that are going on right now in culture? Bill?
Yeah, there are two of them that I think of immediately is that we live in a digital age, and so people are connecting online, they're texting. You see them in restaurants, they're not talking to each other, they're texting each other. I've had enough people over my house sitting on separate couches, and they're not talking, they're texting. So what happens is we have these broad-based connections, and that's growing, but it's more superficial. There's less depth. There's more misunderstanding and more the tendency to create a persona that is truly not you. And so that has to be addressed. The second one that we know about as well is there's no brand loyalty anymore, neither by the company nor its employees. And so the need is to stay on the cutting edge of where the culture is going in society, because if you're looking for brand loyalty and that kind of thing, that's not happening. Whether it's church, there are more. Now one of the categories for church is the nons. In other words, they're not committed to any sense of organizational identity, to a brand, Lutheran, Catholic, some form of Protestant. They're not there. So it demands that we quit demanding the branding loyalty and go to the cutting edge of where they are and meet them where they are.
Anyone else? Josh?
I just want to add, staying on the cutting edge, as Bill mentioned, is so important. But I think you also have to take trends, if you will, with somewhat of a grain of salt. What is trendy is not always what is most effective. So I think you want to definitely adopt mechanisms that are proven effective, but at the same time, remaining educated on the new stuff, or the new trends, if you will, that are out there.
John?
I think both of what my colleagues are saying here today is very important, and I would say reading is something that we all need to do. You need to be a full-time learner. And what comes with that, I think, is two key attributes to work on, and I think where they're developed the most is back through this idea of self-assessment, humility and vulnerability. Too many leaders today get themselves in a position where they think you're exposed because there's only one right answer, or that I have the right answer, or that this is the direction. And with all the information as we were talking and everything going on and how fast the world changes, it's very hard to say this is the right answer and this is the direction we're going. for the foreseeable future. I think it is much more about small individual decisions, about getting that feedback, about getting that vulnerability, to be able to say, yes, I know this is where we were yesterday, but this is where we're going tomorrow, and having those slight changes, and being humble enough to say, in those times where you're wrong, and change direction, are, I think, very key to effective organizations, and effective organizations result from effective leadership.
Just to follow up on that, with the preponderance of trends that go, back in my first church, I wore leisure suits. Some of you remember that. It was short-lived, but, and trends come and go, things come and go. What does that do to long-range planning for an organization?
My folks would tell you we plan 30 seconds, maybe a minute on long days, but no, in seriousness, what I would say is we try to hold to a couple of very tight core values, and that this is what we're trying to achieve as an organization. And then from there, what we try to do is we try to break it down in rather small manageable increments. We manage by a weekly process, we manage by a quarterly process, and then we set some annual goals, and on top of those annual goals, we're looking maybe 2 to 3 years out. But the majority of our time is spent, and I would say somewhere between 30 and around 30-day increments of time. But it's all directed towards these core values of why did we get into this business and what we're trying to do, and making sure that it keeps fitting back to that.
Okay, we live in a world that's filled with crises, and one of the questions came by email. In the event of another national or global crisis, what can our organizations do to be better prepared to face the challenges or the opportunities? What role does faith play in preparing our organizations for the future? I remember when I was a pastor at 9/11, and as we was watching the news in the conference room, people were already coming into the church and making their way to the altar and just kneeling down and praying. And I heard that from pastors all over the country, that happened. So another crisis occurs. Of course, in Findlay, we've had the flood. But if we look at a national crisis, how can we be prepared to better face the challenges or the opportunities? Bill?
Yeah, one of the things, and it kind of fits with a lot of these questions, is the ability to stay connected to the grassroots level. It just takes too long to ramp up so that everything has to flow from the top down. After the Katrina thing and all these things that have taken place, you start to notice that local congregations, local neighborhoods have put together disaster teams, people who are ready to be mobilized if there was some way to notify them, pack up their construction, pack up their trucks, take water, whatever it is. But you have to find a way to stay connected to the grassroots because that's where the multiplicity of people who are available can get that done rather than waiting for the government or somebody, large organization, to always funnel it and flow it from the top.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim, what I would do is I'd tie this back to the opening video clip that we saw and the idea of simplification. I think what's going on within that is people want to be connected. They want to understand where it is we're headed, why it is we're headed there, and they're asking over and over again, how can we do that in a more effective way? And I think it goes back to two other things that I said earlier about leadership and about, as people are saying we want to be connected and we want to be, I think they're also saying we want to be led. It's about vulnerability and humility. And for our organization, I think it's pretty easy because I'm pretty open about trying to merge my life of being a Christ follower with a business leader. So I talk about it relatively openly. But what I don't buy is these organizations that say we're going to separate the two. People still have that basic need. They're still asking, how are we connected to one another? And I think when you look through it, we all have that desire. And we want to be connected to somebody that we think is doing something valuable. It's great, it's an interesting read, but if you go back and read the biography by the founder of Starbucks. He says his number one problem with his organization is convincing people selling coffee is important. I mean, it's back to that idea. How do you convince folks what you're doing is necessary and meaningful? Because we all want to provide, we all want meaning, and we want meaningful connection.
As someone that occasionally meets people that haven't had their coffee in the morning, it is absolutely necessary. Father Mike.
One of the things that the Ministerial Association is working with right now is to help develop a process for a dialogue. As people are pretty familiar, there's quite a bit of discussion going on about the alcohol and drug environment that may be in Findlay and maybe how we work with that. Before we get it all hot and heavy and emotions get running one way or another, maybe it's nice to have some kind of framework for a dialogue so that we could be able to solve and work a problem or a situation out for the best of our community. That might be a way that can happen too.
I was noticing this morning, this is on a much smaller scale, but a community in the country began tying scarves around trees and posts. Did you see that in the community? And it said, you know, these aren't, I'm not lost, take me if you need me. Someone else has added now, they got a plastic bag below with mittens in it, and now they're starting to add coats. So this is happening. No one discussed this, no one had a committee meeting, no one got involved, but the grassroots they saw the need and they began to help. Okay, here's one, which came first, the chicken or the egg question. What is the difference between mission and vision? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Bill.
this one I care so deeply, and if I seem impassioned about it, I really, truly am.
I'm going to take the opposite. No.
Good luck. Because this is where, I don't care if you're talking about secular or religion organizations, we get this wrong, we're in trouble. How many of you watched Undercover Boss? I just watched one of the episodes this week, and the guy goes and he's got this big store complex, and he's working, and quite frankly, he is lousy at the grassroots level. But by the time he's done, he recognizes that he is running on 1950s equipment that has slowed up everything. Customers hate him. They're mad as he's trying to work out stuff. The employees are doing the best they can. But they got mission and vision mixed up. Mission is non-negotiable. It's non-negotiable. It's the why. It's the reason. It's the purpose for existence. It's why we are here, why your company is here. It's like in the military where I learned it the best. The mission is take that hill. That is your mission. It's non-negotiable. I didn't come up with it. Somebody higher up came up with it. And you can ask whoever gave it to you, a colonel or general, and say, how do I do that? He says, soldier, that's up to you. That's the vision. So the mission is non-negotiable. The vision is negotiable. As a matter of fact, that's how you're going to carry out and get that mission done. What happens, I've seen in the church, and I think I've been guilty of it, I turn my vision into my mission, and then you're stuck with how you're going to do it, and quite frankly, it's not working, but you're committed to it. Instead of getting some other input and saying, we're not accomplishing the why we're here. And so we turn our vision into our mission, we're hung up on the method, and we can't change the method because we got those reversed. Selah.
You better battle on that
A word from the psalmist. Thank you. Someone else. Mike.
Jim, I think that there are some good tools that can help us. I've had a couple of people in the parish who've helped me with the measuring technique, scorecarding. Now, I'm sure that many of you know a lot more about scorecards than I do, and maybe your lives are driven by that. But in this church, for us to use a scorecard is something far out, and to us to measure whether we've been successful or to measure, whether we have failed. Matter of fact, in some of that area we're using, I brought along, and if somebody was interested, just out of curiosity, this is a thing that we're developing at St. Michael's called Breaking the Silence Faith Campaign. We're modeling this faith campaign after a finance campaign. And I have to remind all the people in our parish, it's not about, we're not collecting any money, we've already done that. We're now trying to build the church with people, and so we're wanting to use the same technique, put a case book together, have a pledge card. The pledge card is all on spiritual activities, and there's also a listing of the ministries and an example of the scorecard that we're going to measure these things with. Now, Scott, you've got to be proud of me, because I even picked up some of the lingo, We kept the scorecard simple. We didn't put anything on the dashboard because we didn't drill down far enough, et cetera.
Yeah, breaking the silence. I talked to Father Mike about this earlier, but breaking the silence faith campaign, building a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, it's really a spiritual formation piece that what we could use, whether you're in a Catholic church or Protestant church. It's a great idea. It's just applying the campaign with a spiritual mission. So, anyone else have a comment? All right. What are some of the tools available to help review and evaluate candidates, identify high performers, and find the best matches in the shortest amount of time? So this would go for volunteers or employees. What are some tools that you use to find the best employee or the best suited volunteer?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that, boy, it's hard to find the best employer or best volunteer in a short amount of time. If you're finding somebody of that caliber in a short amount of time, you're probably lucky. So I guess to kind of turn it on its head a little bit, instead of focusing on how quickly you can find the best volunteer or the best worker, you should focus on the process itself. And is there areas, maybe let's say an interview process, that you can ask better questions or better ways to evaluate? I mean, there's a lot of different tools that are available to evaluate a candidate with the needs of whatever position you're recruiting. So I think looking at it at that level, as opposed to looking at it as let's get this done as soon as possible. Let's get this done as effectively as possible.
Yeah, we all know it's easier to hire than to fire, so.
Yes. One of the questions I thought of when we saw this question ahead of time is, I want to know what's included in the high performers criteria. Because I'm with Josh. I'm a little hesitant about in the shortest amount of time. Because there's so many kinds of things out there: strength finders, disc profiles, MBTIs, personality assessment tools, past performance, trying to find somebody who will be honest about that person. Because you just can't call somebody and say, how were they? Because you can't say some things that you would like to say. So you're going to have to find other ways to find out people who know them to check out those kind of things, because you can't give bad reviews. You just don't dare. And so
You can sign a blank sheet of paper, though.
you can do that. But there are so many different things out there to do that. But I'm concerned about what do you use as criteria for who a high performer is.
I would say that would be whatever would depend upon the organization. But back in the issue of speed in construction, we have a saying: there's speed or time. Time, price, and quality. You can have two of the three. You can't have all three. You're going to get two of the three. Take your pick. You won't get all three.
Jim, if I could add that, I guess the thing I would say that I believe shortens the amount of time and increases your effectiveness is relationship. You hear the old adage of management by walking around, or I've heard it described in a number of ways. I can't impress enough for people to get out with their people. And then when you get out with your people, think about the culture you're developing. Bill and I were chatting as the video was going on and getting ready. Both of us have worked in an organization that has used a process called 360-degree valuation, where everybody in the organization that touches this individual leader was able to provide feedback. And we both worked with a leader that got the feedback and got some negative feedback, and then went out on a mission to ask the individuals who said what and why. That's not setting a culture to attract leaders in as quick a time as possible and developing them. And so my point to that story is I really think if you want to cut the time, change how you're spending your time and get out with your folks, know your folks, understand your folks, and then create experiences for them to be stretched and see how they do. And this is one thing that there's a group in the back of the room that'll tell you, I am not good at it, I am trying hard. Let them fail. I get called the mother hen at times in our organization. They're trying to protect everybody, but there's great value in being challenged to the point of you have to come back and ask. And if they watch that and support that and continue to develop that. But I really think that culture sets with you all as the leaders and what you're affecting.
I think when I was pastoring, multi-staff, and then you got the deacons and committees, I had a group called the pastors, Men of Eight, and they were basically men that I'd bring into an advisory capacity, and that's where I got many of the deacons and some of the things from. Then there were other committees and other people my wife knew is where we got the women from her different organization. And so it was built on relationship. We already had in our mind one or two candidates for the next position that was open in our mind before it ever happened, because we were already going through the process.
Yeah, the mother of this whole idea of Global Leadership Summit is Willow Creek.
Right.
And Bill Hybels, who oversees that whole mothership, was meeting with several leaders that I got to be part of a number of years ago, and he said they've changed how they find other leaders for Willow Creek. And he said it's all about fit. He said we can find high performers, but they don't fit in with us relationally or culturally. And I thought, boy, that was like, wow. That was a great learning curve for me. It's more about fit, he said, because we can actually ramp up some of the other things if we see the leadership potential, but we can't fix fit.
Yeah, Jack Welch says it a little differently, but it's the same thing. He builds a quadrant, and he talks about results, and he talks about fit into the culture on the two axes. And he says the hardest individual to get rid of in your organization is an individual who gets great results, but in the wrong way.
Wow.
And the only entity, he goes on to say, the party that's responsible for allowing that person to get into that position is their immediate leader.
This is another issue on employees or volunteers. When you've got an employee that is dragging others down, or an employee that is not meeting the obligation, and sort of creating morale problems with other employees, how do you successfully help that person to see what's going on or move them on to greener pastures? Josh.
Okay, I will. Did you say John or Josh?
I thought Josh raised his hand.
Oh, great.
Either
Okay,
way.
go ahead.
Well, hey, just because I'm the young guy.
They're fighting over who. They're fighting over who's going to fire somebody. Just so you know.
We're real
Gosh,
tough guys.
I think the number one thing is in a place where a lot of leaders and even myself have fallen short in the past is that you don't want to have that tough conversation. I mean, that's the worst. The worst days of work are the ones where, personally, I have to go in and tell someone, you're not getting it done, or you need to improve your attitude or something of that nature. Very, very difficult to have. So I think sometimes leaders avoid that. I mean, you have to be, to effectively deal with that situation, I think you got to, from the leader's standpoint, you got to think of it as, I'm going to coach this person up or I'm going to coach them out, one way or the other.
You're going to coach them up or you're going to coach them out?
Correct. And I think the first solution, not only from a cost standpoint, but also from a standpoint of wanting to do what's best for people as well, is that you want to give that employee that's not performing up to par a chance to learn. You want to position them, send them to a training related to their issue, give them all the tools they need to succeed, and then ultimately, if they don't, hold them accountable for it. And unfortunately, that means sometimes the coaching out part.
John?
What I would add, I'd go back to the relationship discussion that I was talking about earlier. I'd agree with everything that Josh was saying, but I believe in the bottom of my heart, and my guess is everybody here has had failure in their life. And they thought along the way that they wish someone would have told them. They wish they would have stopped earlier what they were doing than when they ultimately stopped it. My wife's here too, so she could tell you those afterwards. There's many of them to go through, but I think employees are the exact same way. People don't come in and take a job the first day to say, how long can I stay here before I'm going to get fired? I believe they come with great intentions to do the best job they can for what was described to them in a relatively short period of time. Now it's on management, as the entity is responsible for their success. And what we tend to do is we tend to fill a slot and say, okay, that burning issue's over. Let's go to the next burning issue and leave employee that we just hired to fend for themselves. And so when you see that, what happens is you get back to exactly what Josh was saying. You're into a day that you don't want to go to work. Well, day two, it's a process of going back and staying in relationship and saying, how are you coming along, or making sure your organization's involved in that. And I really believe passionately it's about how do you continue to walk the path. And it goes back to what they were saying here earlier. We all want to connect. And that individual, especially that new person in the job, has probably greater passion to connect with the organization than just about anybody else coming into that organization on that day. And, we all talk about first impressions. I think it's invaluable, the first impression you're going to create on what happens day 2, day 3, day 4, and on down the road for that employee. And if you do it right, hopefully what you do is you manage them into a job that better meets their needs and your needs over time versus getting to the situation of you have to have a dramatic event. But there are times you have to have those as well.
Okay, we're going to try to take a couple questions from you. Some of these were emailed in. Anyone have a question you'd like to ask? Okay, we can probably hear you. If we can, I'll bring the mic back.
With difficulty. Well, I think the churches in particular have a lot of volunteers. And we have some staff people who are very competent and capable, but I say to them immediately, you don't get any more hired people. All the people you need now, you got to go get as volunteers. And I think that the volunteers are needing to be appreciated, and all people need to be respected. Those are some keys. How you make a change with all that is is very difficult. I sometimes use the example that, I have a single mother who comes to me in the office because her child is misbehaving in our school, and she wants to talk about that and hasn't gotten any help, from the school for one reason or another. I try to start off by saying, ma'am, Mary, whatever, you are probably doing the best job you could possibly be doing, under your conditions, under your circumstances, to help, her feel better about her situation. And I just think that we probably have to look at the individual situations that people have. I mean, I say, if we were going to walk in somebody else's skin, what that might feel like or what that might be. Now, I'm not sure that that's an ABC answer to how you work with that situation that you propose, but I do think we have to be very conscious and concerned about the situation that maybe the life of that person. So I would present that.
I don't know who's bringing the, we're going to have a drawing for a couple of books. We're going to have a drawing now, and then while Lisa's coming, and then we're going to have another, someone else with a question. So another hand over the same direction. Yes, sir.
We talk in the church and elsewhere about testing the waters and getting people's input, which is a good thing. But I think sometimes we get in the murky waters of the difference between the corporate opinion and what is the call of the organization. Because those two sometimes are terribly close together. What are strategies? How do we deal with that? People have lots of opinions that may not have much to do with what we're called to be doing.
I think Bill has a solution with that, with focusing on the mission.
Yeah, I think going back and revisit that idea of mission and vision, because so many times in our churches, again, we're committed to the vision of how we've done ministry in the past, and so they won't move on because the mission has been gone. They haven't re-identified. And Rick Warren from Saddleback said over and over again, and I fell prey to the same thing as a church planter, is that you have to revisit every month, every 30 days of saying again what the mission of the church is, and this is the vision for now, and you have to do it over and over again, because what happens is, he says, that leaks. People forget. It goes right out that sieve, and you just have to find fresh ways to say it. But he says it's every 30 days. You may get tired of saying it, but you've got to get it out there and keep it out there, because it will disappear, and vision then will become the mission.
We got time for one last question. I'm going to have a drawing right here. This book is Ready, the 3 R's of Preparing Your Organization for the Future. And it goes to Catherine Park.
Really? Oh, cool.
Someone have a question? This is the last question. If not, there's another drawing, right? One more book. How many of you enjoy coming to these luncheons, getting together? Appreciate your being with us. We thank you for your attendance. This is Scott. Freehafer, just like it looks. I was trying to get too fancy. Okay. Huh? Leading Change. You have multiple copies. Okay, we'll draw another one. This is Dr. Scott's favorite book, and you need chapter 1 and 2. Carl Heminger. Okay, Carl. Right, we appreciate you coming, and make sure you watch the email, and also notice our next Global Leadership Summit is coming in August. Have a great day. God bless you.